guys doing this Tuesday? This sun is right like on my face, so I'm gonna move a little bit over so it's not glaring in my eyes. So we are late again this week. I'm sorry guys, I'm doing my best to keep up with all of our unpacking and stuff, but we'll just do what we can as we can, right? So welcome to week 8. This week we read pages 135 to 154, so it's about 19 pages, excuse me. We finished up this, what was it, part 2, I think? No, part 4. Some habits of mind, some moral habits. So I've got a few books to share today about reading, and then, let's see, we'll just go ahead and get started. So, hi, welcome. I'm glad to see you here. I didn't see you last week, I don't think. I must have been at a time when you weren't available. Okay, so we will, which I'm not sure I know your name, Stitched in Time. I think I looked at your profile, but I didn't see your name. Or maybe I'm just forgetting, I'm sorry. Anywho, okay, so we will get started. So this week she started out talking about how mothers do have a natural intuition that's priceless for educating their, dog had a paw emergency. Jessica, okay, hopefully I will remember that, Jessica. I have a friend named Jessica, so hopefully I'll remember. Okay, so, she talked about how mothers have this special intuition when it comes to educating their children, and she says that it's a priceless gift, but at the same time, she believes there's this science of education that doesn't come through intuition, that she feels like a mother should acquaint herself with in order to give her children the very fullest and best education. And then she goes on to talk a little bit more about habit, which this whole, past section she's been talking about habit. Hello. Habits and how we can form habits in our children. But she says, let's see, the best thing about all this habit training is that the power of these habits falls within our natural love for an easy life. It just makes life go more smoothly whenever we're in the habit of doing the things we're supposed to do. Even though it feels hard to begin with, like she said last week, the more you do it, the easier it gets. So we just have to keep plugging along and doing our best. So this is a quote I wrote down. The mother who takes pains to endow her children with good habits secures for herself smooth and easy days, while she who lets their habits take care of themselves has a weary life of endless friction with the children. So if we would just make that effort to create these habits, life will be easier. However, she says, whenever we consider all these habits that have to be made, it's kind of overwhelming, which it is, because I think of all the ways that we need to, things that I'd like for us to get better at or do more often. It's overwhelming, and it almost makes you feel like not starting at all. I'm going to close these blinds a little because it's really bright outside. There we go. Now I'm not squinting in the sun. Okay. So there are lots of habits that I would like our family to have that we just, they'll just come with time, I guess. We can't be burdened with the thought of all these habits. But she did go on to say, a mother should remember, like she said before, that every tick of time has its time and place to tick. You don't put all the minutes in one moment. Every minute has its place, and all of these habits have their place in our life, and we can't expect to do them all at once or our children to learn these things all at once. We have to take our time and do them one or two at a time. And she says, take comfort in the child who starts in life with, say, 20 good habits begins with a certain capital which he will lay out to endless profit as the years go on. So, even if it's just these few habits that your kids have that are good habits, that's a good start, I think, is what she's trying to say. Don't feel overwhelmed by all the billion habits you wish they had. Focus on the ones that they do well and then build from there. She said, for the mothers who feel a little discouraged by the idea of habit training, you should take comfort in two facts. First of all, that as we train our children in habits, we're forming habits as well. So that habit training that we're, funneling into our children becomes a habit for us, and even a pleasure, she says. So over time, it'll get easier if we just put one foot in front of the other. And then also, she said, a child's most dominant habits are those that we take no pains about. Hi guys, welcome. Hello. We're talking about habits and the things that mothers should take comfort in if they're feeling a little overwhelmed by all the habits we want our kids to learn. So first was, we are forming habits as well as we train our children in these habits. And then also, the most natural habits that our children form, they're formed naturally. We don't have to put a bunch of effort into them. It's through exposure to our daily lives and the way we do things at home. So those are some comforting thoughts. Okay, the next section, she talked about how, like I just said, habits are inspired by our home atmosphere. So we read in the last section about physical habits formed through the atmosphere a child is brought up in, like order, regularity, and neatness. We talked about those last week. But she also said that those aren't the only habits that our children form in this way, kind of through exposure. She said other habits are gentleness, courtesy, kindness, candor, respect. All of these things are formed through the atmosphere of the home. Hi. Oops. There, okay. Oops, I keep accidentally trying to type. Okay, so then she goes on to talk about the habit of attention, which this section was long, but it was really interesting this week. She talked about how the power of attention is so very important because the highest intellectual gifts depend for their value upon the measure in which their owner has cultivated the habit of attention. So whatever our gifts may be, they're useless if we don't have this habit and power of attention as a tool to use in sharpening those gifts or bettering those gifts. So she gave an example of like any professional in his career who has done the studying or learned his skill, they can, pick the facts out of any situation and, put it towards their profession. Whereas an uneducated person, the difference would be clear. If you gave them the same information, but they haven't studied or used their power of attention, then obviously it's going to be a different result. So honing this power of attention, she says, is really, really important in our children, not only for right now, but also for down the line as they grow. Which I love that throughout the whole book, she is kind of pointing us to not only just their education now, but for their futures as well. Like we are growing these little people, because they're already people. She says children are born persons, but we are pointing them in a certain trajectory because they're going somewhere. So these habits that we feel like are small now, they really are important, and they will affect their lives in the future. And I love that she continues to remind us of that fact, that these kids are going to be grown-ups one day, and the habits they form now are important. So, okay, she says, our mind is at the mercy of associations, which I thought this was really interesting. She really did a lot of research and put a lot of thought into these books before she wrote them. I know I've said that before, but every week I'm like, wow, that is amazing. I never thought of it like that before. But she tells us that our minds are never idle. They're constantly moving, which I know that's true for me. My brain never turns off. And it's rare that we actually have control over our train of thoughts or where our mind goes, because they kind of flit around and go from thing to thing. And she says you can see this randomness in something like your dreams. Your dreams are just all over the place whenever you have a dream, because your brain just never turns off. And you can also see it reflected in a child's conversation. Whenever they have a conversation with you, they'll, start talking about this, and then they'll don't jump over to this topic, and then they'll jump over to this topic. And so that's just a reflection of what's going on in their brain. That their brain is constantly making associations. And she gave an example. I didn't put it in my notes, but she gave an example about a kid's conversation and how he'll connect. You'll start out talking about one thing, glass, I think is what she said. And then she'll start talking about Cinderella's slipper. Well, then she'll start talking about somebody else's shoe. And then she'll start talking about, she's all over the place, but there's a reason for it. She's making these connections in her brain. It's not that it's just pointless babble. Her brain is working to connect these things. So Charlotte says that this law of association of ideas is a good servant but a bad master. Because imagine if grown-ups jumped all over the place in conversation like kids, which sometimes I feel like I do that still, but if we all talked like kids, I don't know that we would ever get anything done, because they are all over the place. But as we mature, we learn to kind of focus in more laser sharp on a certain topic and can keep the conversation kind of going in one direction. So that's what she means when she says it's a good servant. Like, we need to be able for our brain to make these associations, but at the same time, we don't want to have childlike conversations all the time. We need to be able to, what did she say? To think what we choose when we choose. And we need to be able to focus when necessary to process new information. I love listening to you talk. Thanks, Pam. That's my mother-in-law. She's so sweet. Yes, especially this habits section. So many good habits will make adulthood easier. I love the idea that life becomes easier with good habits. That is so true, and I think of that even in my own life. Like, if I became a mom really early, and my husband and I started our adult life really young, and I think, if I wish I had read this book 10 or 12 years ago, so that I could have considered these things, because I think my life would have been a lot easier to begin with in my young adult life. But, here we are, and now we're learning these things, right? But hopefully we can give these things to our children and help them with their power of habit. Sorry, the sun is following me. I'm trying to adjust my... There we go. Okay. All right. Okay, so wandering attention. Hello. Hi, guys. Oh, don't worry about the late comment. It's okay. Which I sometimes I was thinking about this the other day. Whenever I get a comment and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, because it takes a couple of minutes for a person to type out what they're thinking, and then I'm talking so fast that I don't know what they're talking about anymore, because my train of thought is all over the place, like we were just saying. But it's okay. Okay. So wandering attention. A vigorous effort of will should enable us at any time to fix our thoughts. Yes, but a vigorous, self-compelling will is the flower of a developed character. I love that quote, because it just made me think of this beautiful flower that we're trying to open up in our children's, personalities, and enable them to be able to be self-compelling, or have a self-compelling will to where they can focus on their own, because that's our goal, right? Yes, we help them now while they're young, but our goal is to empower them to have their own thoughts in mind and thinking. So she says, when a child can't focus on their lessons, it's often because he's at the mercy of the thousands of random thoughts floating through his head. So, like she just said, their thoughts are all over the place. It's harder for them to control those thoughts and focus. And we might think it's harmless when they're small, but at the same time, we can't leave it unchecked, because then, she says, they will form a desultory habit of mind and reduce his own capacity for mental effort. So, yes, they're children, and yes, we should have a little grace for their thoughts. They're all over the place. But at the same time, we need to kind of help and guide them to focus on the task at hand so that they have the power to do that on their own in the future. And she even goes so far as to say that you can cultivate habits of attention even in little bitty babies, because we know that they have this amazing power of observation. They notice everything, but because they notice everything, their attention is really lacking. They see this and this, it captures their attention, but then they see this and they go to this thing, and then they see this and they go to this thing, which is good, but at the same time, it's our job as their moms to help them focus on this just a few minutes longer, this first thing that they notice. And maybe she says, point some things out, make them notice more about it so that they learn to focus their attention, and day by day, that power will grow in their minds. Let's see if anybody has commented. No, we do have some new people though. Hello. So she says that when they go from early childhood before they're in school to now they're suddenly school age, they've made this transition from having to pay attention to things to now they have to pay attention to words, which is a pretty big transition for a little bitty mind, because they're not used to absorbing all these words if they haven't been exposed to it a lot. So she says that mothers should be vigilant not to make lessons too cumbersome for the child at this age. So we don't want to overwhelm them, which I was guilty of that with my firstborn. We started homeschooling the year he started kindergarten, and I just expected way too much from him. I bought this big, huge boxed curriculum, and I'm thinking, yes, we're going to be awesome at homeschooling. And I swear we did like the first week, and I was so tired, and he was like, he hated school, and I'm like, why is it not working? Well, it's because I was just expecting way too much from him at 5 years old. He didn't even know his alphabet, and here I'm like expecting him to read, I learned through experience that you cannot, like she says, don't make the lessons too cumbersome. They need to be in little bitty spurts and just little morsels at a time. I feel like simplicity helps nourish focus in the baby toddler. I had a poor connection there for a minute. I hope y'all can hear me still. I pull from those Montessori style environments for my tiny one. I feel like it works pretty well for us. I haven't looked a whole lot into the Montessori method, but it seems very interesting to me. And I love like the very natural kind of approach to it. And it seems very, what's the word, like gentle. I don't know a lot about it, but I've heard good things about it. And there's even like Montessori schools here where we are. I know there are like preschools and stuff for Montessori type learning. Okay, so we talked about the words and how they're cumbersome at this age. Uh-oh, somebody's outside my door. My 12-year-old's babysitting, so hopefully he can get him under control out there. Okay, so she says, when a child grows stupid over a lesson, it's time to put it away. Let him do another lesson as unlike the last as possible, and then go back with freshened wits to his unfinished task. Which I love how she said, when a child grows stupid over a lesson. But it's true, like whenever they just get that, like they're just staring blankly ahead into the abyss. And you're like, dude, do your work. Well, really their brain is just done. Their brain's fried. It's time to put it away, do a different kind of lesson, and then come back to it later whenever they've got freshened wits to understand what they're doing. And if you have one that, I've got one of these where they just continue to procrastinate even after they have the freshened wits, she says the lesson still has to be done, but we should make them as light and bright as possible, as painless as possible. We don't want to be pulling teeth in order for them to get their lessons done, because that just works in opposition of what we're trying to do. Okay, so lessons attractive. Some principles of education a teacher should know, which I made a little list of what she said. She said that as educators, we should know the best subjects for the student's age, how to make these subjects attractive to their age, how to vary them, like she just said, you go from one kind of lesson to another, and then how to incite a child to effort, and then also how to prevent the substitution of any other natural desires for that of knowledge, which I'm hoping she will expand on this in later chapters. But this was a good list, I thought, for what we should kind of keep in mind as we're trying to educate our children. Okay. Then she talked about having a timetable within clear view with your daily schedule so that your kids can see it. They know what's required of them. They know how long they have to do it. And it's just laid out plainly. There's no question about what do I need to do next, which I have our flow for the day written on a chalkboard. And whenever I started doing that, it seemed to really help. Things are chaotic right now because we're unpacking a million boxes, but it did seem to help us to have, this is what we do in the morning, this is what we do in the afternoon, let's just get it done. Look up there, you can read. Look up there, let's do it. So she says for children under 8, the lessons shouldn't be more than 20 minutes long, which I agree, because after 20 minutes at that age, their brains are just done. And then she says to vary the lessons. She says a thinking lesson first and a painstaking lesson to follow. And the child gets through his morning lessons without any sign of weariness. Excuse me, sorry, I've got a scratchy throat. Sorry guys, I have not the best connection today. Sorry, I hope you guys can hear me. We got a good rhythm and I took it down. Fail. No, I've done that before. I've done that before too, and yeah, I've had several schedules that I just threw away. Well, they weren't working. If it's not working, then you should take it down. Okay. A natural reward. So she says, what's the natural reward for their hard work? If they get their, they have 20 minutes to do handwriting, they get their handwriting done. A natural reward is, like say they get it done in 10 minutes instead of 20, their reward is they get to do whatever they want with that last 10 minutes before they move on to the next lesson, which is an easy, it's an easy reward system. If you're done, okay, you have a little free time, do what you want. And then if he doesn't finish, he doesn't get those extra minutes to do what he wants. So that would encourage him not to dawdle, but to get his work done. So emulation or comparison. She talked about, giving good marks or having a good mark system, which even today, which she mentioned that in her time, this was kind of objected against because, it'll hurt some kids' feelings or if they don't get the good marks. And we have that conversation even now in our time as well. Do we give awards? Do we not? We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But she said the fact is when they reach adulthood, you do get good marks if you do a good job. So we want to prepare our children to work hard in order to earn what they deserve, is I guess what she was trying to say. Let's see. So she says, and I put this quote down because it was really good. She said, if a system of good marks be used as a stimulus to attention and effort, the good marks should be given for conduct rather than for cleverness. That is, they should be within everybody's reach. Every child may get his good mark for punctuality, order, attention, diligence, obedience, gentleness, and therefore marks of this kind may be given without danger of leaving a rankling sense of injustice in the breast of the child who fails. Emulation becomes suicidal when it is used as the incentive to intellectual effort, because the desire for knowledge subsides in proportion as the desire to excel becomes active. So we want to give sorry, my connection is not good. We have a new internet service, so I'm sorry guys. So she says good marks for the things that everybody can get good marks for, because obviously some kids will be better at intellectual things than. I'm going to turn off my Wi-Fi and see if that helps. Hello? Okay, so good marks for the things that all children can get good marks for, not something that maybe somebody's more talented in, is what she's trying to say. Okay, affection as a motive. So she says that it's good for our children to want to please their parents with their hard work, but at the same time, you don't want to make this an unhealthy habit where the only reason they're doing things and the only reason they're motivated is because they want to please you. What you really want their motivation to be is the result of their hard work. So there's a big difference there. Okay, the attractiveness of knowledge. So children are naturally curious and there's a great attractiveness and knowledge to them. So usually when their thirst for knowledge is diminished, it's the fault of the educator. It's not their fault, it's the educator's fault because you're making it boring or you're making it, snuffing out their natural curiosity. Okay, so what is attention? She says that the attention isn't a faculty of the mind or even an operation in the mind. Instead, it's the act by which the whole mental force is applied to the subject at hand. Which this little explanation was a little hard for me to grasp, but I think I understand what she means. And she says that this act of attention can be trained into a child as habit by the parent through means of a sufficient motive. As a child gets older and matures, he should learn to bring his own will to bear and make himself focused to get his work done, no matter what distractions may present themselves, which this is our goal. Like I said before, it's not for us to constantly be telling them what to do, but for them to learn through habit how to get their work done, bring his own will to bear, and use that power of habit to do what he needs to do and get it done. She says that whatever the natural gifts of the child, it is only insofar as the habit of attention is cultivated in him that he is able to make use of them. So even if he's naturally gifted, he won't go far if he doesn't cultivate this habit of attention to where he can laser focus on this gift and better it and make it better and become more skilled in it. So the secret of overpressure. I found this to be very interesting as well. She says that we shouldn't force a child to do a lesson that they're not going to put their heart into, because the truth is the lessons that most stress a child are those that they weren't paying attention to in the first place. In contrast, the lessons they complete with ease are a delight to them. And she went in more detail in the book. I can't remember exactly what words she said. I didn't put it in my notes, but she talked about how the things we're not doing are the things that stress us out most, but the things we get done are the things that kind of provide us some relief, and that's the same for our kids. Then she goes on to talk about homework and how, as parents, once they become more independent, we can still encourage them to get their work done in a timely manner and not be taken all afternoon and evening. She says you can reduce the dawdling by giving them a certain amount of time, an hour and a half, to get done with their homework. And then if they finish, you kind of put a little incentive at the end to where you say, okay, so now we're going to play a board game or have some family time or, whatever as a family in the evening because they got their work done. And if they don't finish, she says don't reprimand them, but show them your disappointment. And then you don't get to do the fun family thing that you would have done because now you're out of time. It's bedtime. So to have that little incentive in there, she recommends in order to help them get their work done and not dawdle. And she also states that children under 14 shouldn't be given homework at all. So that is new, I think, to our generation. Well, I don't know. I know I had homework at a young age. I'm not sure how schools do it now, but okay, so rewards and punishments should be relative consequences of conduct. She says, so our reward or disciplines, whichever one we have to get, should be in relation to, they should be repercussions for whatever their effort was. Just like in the real world, if you give a good effort, you're rewarded. If you don't do such good effort and you halfway your way through your work, then you're probably going to be disciplined. So like you with an adult, you do the same thing with your children. Okay, natural and educative consequences. This continual cycle of dealing out rewards and punishments for a job done in a particular manner takes a great deal of patience on our part as the moms, because we're the one having to deal out whether you get a reward or punishment or discipline, whichever word you'd like to use. We have to be diligent and we have to be consistent in these rewards and disciplines. So you have to be diligent in rewarding them for good work and diligent in disciplining them for not good work. And she says, while one child may earn his 10 minutes of free time, we can't let the lazy child who didn't get his work done have the same luxury of the free time. Not because it's not fair to the one who did his work, it's not fair to the kid who didn't do his work, the lazy kid, because we're encouraging him to not put forth the effort that he should have next time. So we don't want to encourage that habit. Okay, so then she goes on to talk about the habits of application, rapid mental effort. As we work on that with them, they'll be able to think more quickly, and she says just a little bit each day, and every day they'll get a little quicker with their responses. And then zeal must be stimulated. We shouldn't allow them to complain about their lessons because it can easily become a habit. But instead, their zeal should be stimulated. In other words, make the lessons interesting and fun. Okay, the habit of thinking. I think we're almost done, guys. We have a basketball game. We have to leave here at 3 o'clock, so I hope I'm not rushing too much, because this was a really great section and it was good information. Okay, so she says that real conscious thinking and drawing conclusions requires the ability to trace cause from effect, or to trace the final effect of a cause. So she gave an example of a guide taking his caravan through, I don't remember where, maybe Africa or somewhere with lions. But he saw condors in the sky, and because he saw these birds circling in the sky, he knew there must be a lion ahead eating a carcass, because if the birds saw the carcass if they saw the carcass and nothing was there eating it, they would have dove and eaten the carcass. But because they're just circling ahead, they're like jealously watching this lion. And this guide that was guiding the caravan on this safari or whatever it was, he knew this because he had made these connections before. So he didn't have to see the lion in order to know there's a lion ahead. He made the connection by seeing the birds in the sky. And the people in the caravan are like, what is he talking about? We don't see a lion, but she says these connections in our brain, these are the kinds of connections we want our children to make in their lessons, which I'm assuming she'll go more in depth of this, making these connections in a later section, but she just kind of touched on it this week a little bit. Okay, so next she goes on to, and this was probably my favorite part because I love reading, and I love, oh wait, hold on, we have a comment. So the thought I had about the laziness is, what standard are we holding the kids to? Just because I disagree about the thing about the adults getting disciplined about effort and result, yes. I don't know, I guess that's something you decide for your own family. Like, I wouldn't expect my 6-year-old to put forth the same effort as my 12-year-old. Is that what you mean? Kind of like what? I think the standard that we hold them to will be different with each family, unless she goes into that more later in the book. I'm not sure. But I think, your own kids and what they're capable of. And I guess as moms, that is where she says we have the big job of measuring and deciding, and we have to be really, what did she say? Committed and constantly on watch and being watchful of the effort they put forth. I'm not sure if I answered that well or not. If not, let me know. I have a lot of thoughts about it. Hard to type here and keep up. Yes, I know, I understand. Well, you can message me. I don't know that I have an answer for that. But I know in our family, I just gauge that on what I know they're capable of, and if they're just being lazy, then sorry, dude, you're not earning your free time. But if it's just too hard, then usually you can tell. I don't know. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so then she talked about the reading, and she talked about how books like the nonsense books like Alice in Wonderland are good, but you don't want your kids to have too much of that because it's just nonsensical. I was basically a super lazy student, slept through class, got straight A's. Oh, well, lucky you. Jeez. So school was fairly easy for me. I didn't sleep through class, I don't think, but I think some people it just is easier. So yeah, it is, you gauge it on each kid's capabilities and not, which I think that may be some of the issues with the public school system, is it really is kind of a cookie cutter education. I'm always telling my husband that it's like a one size fits all, which that's not to say like every teacher feels that way. It's the standardized method that we've come to accept, but not everybody learns the same ways, so you can't expect everybody to be successful in the same ways or be good at the same things. So that's what I was getting at, I guess, with effort versus results. Yeah, I think that's the great thing about our homeschooling is that because we are with our kids all the time, we do know their strengths and weaknesses, and we can kind of gauge based on what we know about our kids and make our own kind of standard as to what standard should you be reaching today, I guess. Is that kind of what you're, I don't know, because I think there is a lot of, what's the word? There's a lot of chit chat about like how do you motivate children, and we don't want to overwork them, and there's lots of conversations about that. But that's what I took from it, or that's how we will implement it in our homeschool, is based on your skills, you the 6-year-old, and then you the 12-year-old. I expect you to kind of be at a higher level of getting the job done. Okay. Let's see. So she talked about books. And I have some books about books, and some of them I mentioned before. Some of them I have not. But she talked about how the nonsense books are fun to read, but they shouldn't be the only nonsense, meaning like Alice in Wonderland, where it's just like craziness all over the place through the whole book. And then she says the silly books that are just comedies, those should be in smaller portions. Then she talked about commonplace stories of everyday life. Real life stories are good, but they also leave little to the imagination. So she says that children should have access to a large number of books that make them use their imaginations. And then I put this quote down because I loved it. Let them have tales of the imagination, scenes laid in other lands and other times, heroic adventures, hair-breadth escapes, delicious fairy tales in which they are never roughly pulled up by the impossible, even where all is impossible, and they know it and yet believe. So good fiction stories where, the odds are against the hero, and it's mythical lands, and she says this is what grows our imagination. I hope I'm not going to run out of time. I don't know what time I started exactly. I think I have a few minutes left. She says the purpose of imaginary tales goes far beyond amusing children, so these books have more power than just amusement. She said these types of stories help us to think outside of ourselves, and these are often the types of stories that lead people to do marvelous and self-sacrificing things. She said, what a shame it would be for any generation to go down in history as a generation that had no imagination. So true. The more a child's lessons come alive to him, the more his imagination grows. She says, like every other power of the mind, imagination is the merest germ of a power to begin with, and grows by what it gets. and childhood, the age of faith, is the time for its nourishing. The children should have the joy of living in far lands and other persons in other times, a delightful double existence, and this joy they will find for the most part in their storybooks. I love, 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 love that quote, and I so agree. Okay, so the books that I was going to mention, I've mentioned these first two before. Honey for a Child's Heart by Gladys Hunt, a book about books, but I love what she says about reading and the power of reading and the power of imagination. And then Read for the Heart by Sarah Clarkson. This is also one I mentioned, I think, in like week 1 or 2, but this one's very similar to Honey for a Child's Heart, but has books, lots of books, suggestions. It tells you what the books are about. And then this one, Caught Up in a Story. This is also by Sarah Clarkson, and I love this book. It's a little book, so it's a quick read, but I just love the way she talks about the power of story in our lives and in our children's lives and what they do to cultivate our imagination and our bravery and our courage and our wonder. I love, love, love this book. I highly recommend this book, Caught Up in a Story by Sarah Clarkson. And also, recently, I have not started this one, but I got this one. It's by Sarah Clarkson, too. I'm a fan. Can you tell? It's called Book Girl. And this one is for women. So, not for kids, but for grown women. What to read. Like, when you're feeling a certain way, what books are good books for your mood, I guess. So, I'm excited to jump into this one. And then also, I want to mention the Read Aloud Family. I don't have that one in as a physical copy, but I do have it on my Kindle. And that one's a really good one, too. So, yeah, those are my book suggestions, and all really good books. Okay, and then that's just about the end. She summed up this section by saying that thinking comes by practice, just like any other skill that we acquire. A child who never has thought will never think, so we have to kind of force them to think for themselves. And she said the child must think, get at the reason why of things for himself every day of his life, and more each day than the day before. So she gave the example of like when a kid asks you why, rather than just giving them the answer, turn it around and say, well, why? Why do you think? What do you think the answer is? And they can turn it over and over in their head. If they can't come up with the answer, then okay, go ahead and give them the answer, and they'll always remember it. But sometimes they may come up with the answer themselves, and you have just strengthened their power of thinking by allowing them to find the answer themselves. And I thought that was just a great way to sum up this chapter. So that was all of this week's reading, or last week, I'm sorry. We're now on a new week. We're on week 9 now. This week we're reading 154 to 168. And this week we're wrapping up this chapter, part 4. So it's not as many pages, only 14 pages, so it should be hopefully fairly easy. Hopefully I can get it done before the weekend, and we can go back to our regular scheduled times. But anyways, if you guys don't have anything else, I'm going to end this video. Hello to all of you. I'm going to post this so that you can all watch whenever you need to. But that was it, and I loved this section just like all the sections before, and I'm excited to move forward. You guys let me know if you have any questions, and I will see y'all next week. Bye.